IFS is a part that's been forced to an extreme role.
Yeah.
And so it is important for people to feel confident that they can address suicidal parts successfully, because otherwise our managers will essentially get into arguments with these parts.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never talked to somebody who's won an argument. So I really don't advocate getting into arguments with parts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so what I tried to do is teach people how to get these parts to align with your project without arguing with them, because arguing with people doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mike. That's helpful. Another question is from Nadia, and she asks, how does the IFS model handle transference and counter-transference in the relationship between therapist and client?
Well, one of the things I love about IFS is it allows us to address those processes very directly. And when I was being educated in psychoanalytic theory, there was sort of there was the idea hanging around. I don't know whether it was directly stated, but it was certainly heavily implied that a good experienced therapist did not have any countertransference and was sort of a clear stream. And that may be true, but if that is true, I've never met a good and experienced therapist. And saw transference as being the sort of neurotic, malicious process that had to be essentially undone. And we see it as responses to burdens. And so your parts will trigger parts of me. And the knowledge that they're just parts of me is very useful. And also, one of the things that I notice is if I'm talking to you and I notice that you're not responding, you're responding in a defensive way or protective way, what I've been trained to do is look inside and look for a part of me that's blended with me, that's generating unsafety in your system. And understand that unsafety that you're generating is not a neurotic, crazy response to my goodness and good intention, but a protector that's been triggered because something I've done has triggered a tender part of you. And so I need to get curious about it in me, and also communicate with your system in a way where it doesn't feel blamed or put on the spot, so I can get information about how my behavior triggered protective energy in you, and figuring out a way to stop that from happening so I can be useful to you again. And so something I say to any client is, if anything that I do makes any part of you feel unsafe, even if you think that part of you is wrong, I really need to know about it. And until I do know about it and address it, I can't be useful to you. Yeah. And so the more information I can get from my client about how their parts are responding to me, the more useful I can be.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, the last question, because we are running out of time.
Yeah, we're out of time.
Yeah, it's a question from Heller, and really also very interesting about that. Can you say more about why self-manifesting is seen as threat by protectors?
Well, you mean protectors that have experienced complex trauma? There's, it's not absolutely known. Dick's theory and it's certainly not a crazy theory, is that uh, complex trauma basically consists of the experience of a client is that any time they exhibit any self qualities, courage, curiosity, connectedness, creativity, they get punished for it.
Mhm.
And so to protect the client, the self gets essentially exiled, gets pushed out of the system. And self, of course, doesn't resist anything. Self has no agenda. So if it doesn't feel welcome, it doesn't. There are, there are other theories, which is the person had an experience of self being present while they were being abused, and self didn't intervene. Mm-hmm. And so they feel self is, they either identify self with the abuser or see self as being indifferent to their pain and their experience. They may have experienced humiliation and see self as having seen their shame and experience and associate that with shame, because shame is in my understanding, is the experience of having your badness witnessed, and it's the worst thing that can happen to us. Mm-hmm. So if you experience self-presence with shame, if you associate them with shame, obviously you'll be reluctant to be in the presence of self. Those are some of the ideas that have been generated about that. And, when I'm negotiating with these parts, they're not always very clear on how that happened. They're just really clear that they respond to the idea of self with fear. And so what I found most useful with them is something I don't find useful with phobia, which is progressive exposure to self. Mm-hmm. That with phobia, when you're basically progressively exposing something that people experience as loathsome and terrifying, that's a really painful experience. When you're progressively associating, exposing to somebody with to love and self-energy, that's a much more pleasant process for them.
Yeah.
And so that's how I try to eventually get these parts to realize what they're really dealing with.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. Wow. Mike, thank you so much. This has been illuminating. You're an inspiration, such a wisdom. I really appreciate you being here and sharing what you shared. And I'm really looking forward towards our series of workshops 2 weeks from now. Yeah, so thank you so much. Is there anything you would like to say where people can find you?